Hello, hello. Welcome back to Acquire and Operate. We are building a portfolio of micro SaaS firms, and we're doing it in public for the love of the game. What up, Kalo? How we doing, my
What's
man?
up, Kale? I'm
You know,
doing
I,
amazing.
I brought out my special shirt for today. I was looking through some of our old videos. I was like, damn, I wear the same thing every time, and it's not that splashy. So I'm gonna take a little risk today and send it with the attire.
You know what? I like the risk. When I first got on, I was wondering, man, I need to jazz it up a bit too. So who knows? Next call, I might come on with a bow tie.
I like it, dude. I like it. We got to start to, establish those uniforms, so to speak.
Oh yeah.
But excellent. So we are jumping back in with a deal teardown, and the headline here is a graphic design SaaS. So think creative stuff, website banners, ads, social media posts, all the above. Pretty much a base necessity for business today, and it's doing 800K in revenue, slightly less in ARR. And I think the headline here is that this is probably a tech-enabled service business in SaaS clothing. And so I think that's a really, really important distinction and a critical role when we're originating and diligencing deals, is to really, really understand the business model. So let's dive in. Pull up some of the details here. So some of the headlines. So as we mentioned, 800K, or the asking price is 2.5 million. Trailing 12-month revenue is 800K, so that's a multiple of 3.13x. Pretty common at this scale of revenue and with this growth rate. Trailing 12-month profit is 300K, so decent margin, right? I mean, 800K in revenue, 300K in profit, and the income multiple is 8.3x. And so I guess the inference there is that it would take you 8 years to earn your money back. And the trailing 12-month growth is 30%, which is nothing to bat an eye at. Rule of X, which is 2 times growth plus profitability, is 0.98, which is very solid. Anything above 0.4 is compelling. Product stack, very modern to a degree. They've got React, JS, PHP, Postgres, SQL, Redis, RabbitMQ, and then a bunch of other stuff. It's hosted on DigitalOcean, etc. But it's a React app with some funky PHP in there. And here's the thing that got me going around tech-enabled services: a team size of 21 to 100 people. I was like, whoa, what are all those
Yeah.
people doing to generate 800K in revenue? And how in the hell is it only costing you 500K?
Right.
That's a lot of overhead headcount wise to have that kind of margin. And so you start to wonder, are these people on-demand creatives that are just getting paid a margin of the revenue for each transaction? Is that so? Which would be more of a cost of goods sold versus kind of costs that are a function of operating the business more generally. But some cool stuff. So I mean, and it was framed as like a platform, right? And I think probably at the end of the day, it's an external team of on-demand humans that are using
Yep.
software, using generative AI tooling to execute. And the thing that tipped me off a lot was the comparables were Design Pickle and Penji, and Upwork was in there. And I was like, Upwork is a contractor marketplace. So is Design
Yep.
Pickle. So is Penji. And they've gotten, this is like a productized service meets tech-enabled services. And that is a whole bunch of SaaS jargon that's going to confuse everyone that doesn't play this game every day. So it's like, all right, instead of being like, hey, I'll create social media ads for you and it's going to be $50 an hour and the turnaround time is whatever it is, it's like, it's $4 per social media ad and we turn it over in 48 hours. So that's how you productize a service. All my consultants out there are going to be very familiar with that. And then the tech-enabled thing is like, the customer thinks this takes us a long time, but we're using software and generative AI, so it takes a tenth of the time, and there's still the value that's there, so we can juice our revenues and our costs get offset because we're basically getting the stuff done faster, leaner, meaner.
Exactly. To summarize, a SaaS business is an actual platform with,
Yeah,
you can consider like a CRM, where you enter it and it literally has all the tools that you need to get your job done without the intervention of another human. A
exactly.
tech-enabled service, it's just a consulting firm with a bunch of hands on deck that use technology to streamline their processes. That's it.
It's very well said. Yeah, totally. So they got a huge headcount, which is kind of funky. But I will
Yep.
say, pricing is, I think, and this is on a monthly basis, but they have subscription revenues. So that's where it's easy to be like, oh, this is a SaaS business, because it's like, hey, you're going to be working with creatives. You'd send them a quick brief. They're in your Slack group. They use tooling to, shit out creative,
Yep.
and we'll do it for $450 a month. and it renews automatically each month. Okay, that's a subscription-based business, but it's not SaaS at its root. And I think they've done some interesting things to kind of validate the pricing. So they're charging between $449 and $2,300 a month. That's probably purely based on breadth of creative output and volume. So if you just want email banners and you need 10 a week, it's whatever. You need email banners and social media posts and bing to bing to bing, and you need a bunch of them per month, you got to pay more. So the only other thing that to call out here that was kind of a headline was an 85% retention rate, which implies 15% churn. So that means you have to replenish your entire customer base every 7 years. That is atrocious in B2B SaaS. But if this is probably isn't B2B SaaS as we spoke about. So just another thing where, and I speak about this later in the post, but it's like, I was listening to a podcast, All In, and Chamath was like, the worst mistakes I've made as an investor are when I invested in something and kind of confused this for that. So he's like, I bought a SaaS business and it was tech-enabled services. I bought a consumer product that was actually direct to, whatever it is. So like a crisp grasp on the fundamentals, namely the business and the revenue model, is mission critical. And I think the disclaimer here is every business is slowly becoming a tech business, right? So basically every business is
doing what they're doing and then just wrapping themselves in technology and saying, hey, I'm a tech business. Like, whoa.
And so I think the assumption is that like every business under the sun is kind of a tech-enabled services business now. But they're going to try to pitch SaaS because the multiples, revenue, the value of that recurring revenue that's very enduring is awesome. It's rewarded in the form of multiples. And the other piece too is that the margins, right? So that's the other thing too. So all of these metrics need to be kind of considered with a grain of salt when they're like, our CAC to LTV is incredible. It's like, yeah, but if your LTV is $4,000 in a SaaS business, as much as $3,000 of that is going to the bottom line. In a productized service, maybe as much as like 1,500. So everything needs to kind of be taken with a grain of salt. And the main thing is like the context here is probably not SaaS, and you need to be woke as shit to that. Oh, the other one I was going to say is .ai. How many business domains are .ai now?
Oh, or .io.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like every business now is spinning themselves as SaaS, and I think more importantly, spinning themselves with generative AI because that's the storytelling that's getting everybody jazzed. So be woke to that fact, and have your guards up.
I would add to that, it's essentially being woke to the SEO hacking that's going on. Everyone's getting that very nice primary domain, and then now they're just peppering .ai type buzzwords and keywords across all of their metadata on their site. So it's like popping up as though it's a SaaS company, generative AI, but it's really just a tech-enabled service. So be very woke to companies that are wrapping themselves in technology to seem like they're tech-enabled. And then another point that stood out earlier when you mentioned churn about this business is, let's say it's 15% churn right now. We see they have a subscription. But let's say, for example, the managed service part of it that requires one of the team members, let's say an Upworker, to step in and actually assist with some of the services. If that person gets a bad review or doesn't deliver fast enough, that churn spikes immediately. You know what I'm saying? And that's the challenge with tech-enabled services, because we think, oh, the platform, we can, evaluate that with similar churn rates as other SaaS platforms. No, that churn is relevant to the delivery and fulfillment of the people doing the work.
And there's tons of variance in delivery and fulfillment because of the human element, right? And if business grows, like in SaaS, it's like we built the product, we deliver it for free, we fulfill for free online. It's obviously web-based. In a tech-enabled service, it's like, oh man, we got a huge spike in customers. We need to scale our humans. So revenue scales, cost scale, not SaaS, right? So anyway. So we won't spend a ton of time here, but and scorecard, and I was gentle with the scorecard, and I think the lesson here to communicate is back to getting clear on the business model. It was probably like I gave it the benefit of the doubt that there is like hardcore SaaS platform component here, and we could unwind the tech-enabled services bit and just go hard at the SaaS platform and make it self-serve for users. But we landed at a 2.6 out of 4. That in reality, that's probably a 1.6 out of 4. But the bottom line is, and then so now we have our Micro SaaS hat on. We want to play in small categories, no tech titans, no venture-backed crew. The global graphic design market is valued at $45 billion. So it's like ooh, that's a lot of money, and that's a big market to go after. In the United States alone, it's 13.3 billion, and it's going to grow. It's going to like double by 2030. So the CAGR's healthy as can be at 4.5%, and obviously this. And what was interesting is a big underpinning that I learned from this is based on e-commerce, because so many solo small business e-commerce businesses are standing themselves up, obviously enabled by Shopify, enabled by all the tooling, drop shipping, FBA.
Yeah.
They all need creative. So it's
Yeah.
like, and it dawned on me, I was like, shit, as much as like 50% of the ads that I'm getting served up in my Instagram feed or whatever, it's e-commerce brands that are, solopreneurs slanging all natural deodorant, slanging, supplement. I mean,
Apparel.
and it's just like they all need ads. So
Yep.
they all need social media. So I didn't really see that as clearly as I did before. But, obviously on the trends and industry driver side, you must be living under a rock to assume that graphic design right now is not absolutely exploding with Dolly, with Mid-Journey, all these generative models where it's like, myself on a mountain with a Superman cape, riding a Harley Davidson, getting chased by a bear. And it's like,
Yep.
there you go.
Yep.
Right. So generative AI. Yeah.
And to add to that, what I've also seen recently is essentially the stock photo websites like Unsplash, Shutterstock, and all of those. They're also integrating with tools like tools for generative AI, like print on demand shops like Printify, Printful, whatever. So if you want to create a coaster, t-shirt, whatever in 5 minutes, these tools are in there. So cool. Look at Unsplash and generate a graphic using one of these images and drop it on the t-shirt. And it's like, whoa, it just did that in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So
or like product
this market's
markups.
growing.
Like think about back in
Yes.
the day, product markups, it would be like, hey, we need to put our logo on this, Absolute vodka
Yep.
bottle, blah, blah, blah. Now it's natural language. You just type it in and away you go. So automation and AI integration absolutely exploding. And then I think we knew this, and the data on this has always been wild, but it's, video content is 4 times more engaging. This stat was kind of trippy. The human brain processes visual information up to 60,000 times faster than text.
Wow.
So that was the old thing. It was like, mind your audience. They're probably visual. It's like they are visual. Or assume
We're all
that
visual.
assume that they are visual. So your storytelling needs to be visually supported. So obviously that lends well towards graphic design. And then digital marketing is marketing. Like now it's like, are you doing any physical marketing? It's like, yeah, we sponsored a billboard. It's like, whoa. Or we're going to put, an article in the New York Times. It's like, wow, that's interesting. So marketing is digital marketing. The physical marketing is more like what you would need to distinguish in today's market. So anyway, future outlook, as I had touched on, e-commerce is exploding and enabled with all the business services like shop, blah, blah, blah. And then obviously there's kind of increased technical or digital transformation in the economy that's pulling this stuff forward. And then technology advancements are so fast and so incredible that it's like changing what we think is possible. Like I was playing with Firefly in Adobe, and like literally I could take my picture and be like, and draw the most, not great little loop lasso around my image and be like on the beach. And it's like, bing, or it's like
just generates
in space,
background.
bing. And it looks like, once upon a time you'd have to pay a designer in Photoshop and it would take them hours to generate that type of stuff. So it is a different world that we are living in, full stop. And it's only going to go faster.
Do you want a crazier real life use case?
Yes.
If you all go to for anyone that's listening, if you all go to my LinkedIn right now, my LinkedIn headshot, that's a generative AI image. I took 6 images of my face, went to Aragon.ai, yes, shameless plug, generated 100 AI images, and man, that thing was good. Remember back in the days where it would take a couple hours and a few $100 with a headshot professional?
Yeah. Or you go out there with your iPhone and just make it work,
Yeah. You got to go run across town, find like the best angle, and you're like, oh, portrait mode. Is this it? No. You just drop that thing in 5 minutes. You have 100 photos to select from, and at least 10 of them were spot on. It was amazing.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, and just like the velocity of whoa moments is just
getting you to that aha moment immediately.
But it's also just like, whoa, I can't believe this did this. Whoa, I can't believe this can do this. Whoa, I can't believe this can do this. Like I'm saying that on a weekly basis now. It's just like, whoa.
It's like a dopamine hit.
Yeah, it's just
you're looking
like,
for that whoa.
It's just like, this used to take so much time. Or even now, when I calendarize stuff, I'm like, this thing is going to take me 3 hours and I'm done in an hour tops. And it's all because of generative AI tooling. And I'm like, okay, I need to start to update my estimates around the time intensity of work because I've got a small army behind me, you know?
I love that. As a good learning tip, I saw this happen in our one-on-ones. We added a section called intelligence gathering. And in that, we were like every week when we meet, we're mentioning all the tools that give us that whoa moment. So I love that practice that you and I have been doing. And I encourage anyone listening, do that in your one-on-ones as well. What are you going out there to read? What tools are you going out there to find? How are you streamlining your processes to go from 5 hours to 30 minutes?
Yeah.
It's all about efficiency.
And on the topic of plugs, Arc browser with Perplexity as your default search is such an exponential leap forward of like and think about how much time you spend browsing the internet. If you can short circuit that and put 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 units of efficiency into that work stream, like I'm just like, I'm just like, holy shit, I feel like Superman. All right. So anyway, so now let's extrapolate back and we're going to dig into what is kind of a spin on a SWOT analysis. So we'll talk strengths, we'll talk risk factors, and we'll talk quick wins and opportunities. And some of the strengths I need a better term for this. It's like a backhanded strength, like a backhanded compliment. It's like, this is a strength, but actually it's totally not. So the first one is, you look at, and I think their CAC, and who knows how they're backing into that number, was like $400. So it costs them $400 to acquire a user, which is a lot. That's a healthy amount of dough. And but the lifetime values are 4K. So they're like, hey, we're going to spend $400 to acquire something that's going to generate 4K for the business. It's like, holy smokes. I mean, that's a 1 to 10 CAC to LTV ratio. That's absolutely bananas. Or I guess let's put it in context. In SaaS, 1 to 3 is like the holy grail. So it costs $100 to acquire a user that's going to pay you $300. So you find unit economics like this where you're extraordinarily profitable at the unit level. All you have to do is stack as many units as you can. You've got a really interesting business. But the assumption, but this is in the context, or a 1 to 10 would be absolutely bananas in the context of SaaS, where the assumption is that, 80, 90% of that LTV. So if the LTV is 4K, like $3,000 of that is gross margin at least. And so it's like, okay, we just discussed how in tech-enabled services to grow revenue, your costs have to scale. So realistically, the interpretation of LTV here needs to be understood where it's not in the context of SaaS. Those lifetime values are much less if we're thinking about it through the lens of profit. So all to say, the lifetime values, the unit economics, like literally blew me back in my chair. I was like, whoa, oh my God, let's buy this. And then I looked at it and I was like, whoa. That's super misleading. Like CAC to LTV is a SaaS metric. It's a SaaS benchmark. This is a tech-enabled service. Those ratios are not that dope. So anyway, but it would have been a strength if it was a SaaS business.
See, but this is going back to your earlier point. This is why you want to have a firm grasp on the monetization model for that business. Because if we truly did look at it as SaaS and say, hey, this is a 1 to 10, anyone would run out and buy it just to get in the door and say, well, there's a lot of other costs involved in this process that are not accounted for here, which typically happen with service-based businesses.
Totally. So, and then I guess moving on to healthy profit margin, I mean, 800, whatever that is, it's, 45%, I think. That's a super healthy profit margin. Why do we care? Because you need profit to show that you can service the debt used to acquire the business. You need ideally you can grow the business with the profit that the business is throwing off. So you don't need to bring new capital to the deal. But I think most importantly, it's like this operator, this founder is doing an outstanding job running a tech-enabled service at a 45% margin. It's like, dude, good for you. And then you start to wonder, like, is this SaaS? Like, I'm just confused. And obviously the next step from here would be to just figure that out. Obviously, it's like, hey, dude, tell me about the client lifecycle. What am I doing? Or to buy the product and test it yourself and kind of reach those conclusions. So anyway, that's that.
Another question that I would have here would be, this started in 2020. So about 3 years ago, right around the pandemic, right around when AI, crypto, and everything was starting to boom and become very popular. So I would wonder how sustainable is this current performance, and do we expect it to decline, let's say maybe the next few years as the competition grows in the space?
Yeah, well, I think competition is absolutely terrifying, as we'll talk about, because you are competing with people that are like moving human society forward.
literally changing the culture,
like literally moving our species forward. But well, I think the only other comment to make here too is that, with a margin like that, it implies repeatability and consistency, right? And that translates typically to really defined work, procedures and playbooks, SOPs, however you want to think about it, which is a beautiful thing as a new owner, where it's like, oh, you want to know how to run the business? Here's a table of SOPs. Cool. You just brought in somebody new, just point them towards the table. They'll be ramped in a week. So for that transition period as a new owner, that accelerates stuff radically. So that's all good. And then obviously global and diverse client base. They've got clients everywhere across every category, up and down market segments. And there's no customer concentration, which we've spoken about, which we don't like, which is like, okay, 60% of our revenue comes from one client. You're like, okay, whatever. And then you come in and buy the business and that one client churns and it's like, oh shit, 60% of our revenue just walked out the door. We are totally hosed. What do we do? So none of that stuff's there. And I think what's most interesting, and we've talked about this a lot, is, go small to go big. So just think that when you have a global and a diverse client base, you have a lot of things to choose. There's a huge menu to choose from when it's like, this is the thing we're going to triple down on. And we're going to go super hard at this very niche vertical. And we're going to basically configure what we can to be perfect for that vertical. You have a wide range of options and you have a ton of data to help you figure out which one is the best, which is usually a function of retention, average revenue per user, or average contract value. Like, we want the people that stay with us the most and pay us the most. Simple as that. And then what are those attributes? Beauty. That's our new ideal customer profile. Let's go acquire more of them. Okay. Risk factors. If we haven't said it yet, here it is. So the business model. This has got to be tech-enabled services, but there's some confusing components around it. I think that, we've spoken about this probably as much as is needed, but the main thing is that costs scale with revenue. So that means you can't achieve those type of margins in SaaS that are absolutely glorious. Those revenues the quality of those revenues isn't as great or enduring. So the multiple on those revenues isn't as good. And most importantly, it's like, this is a tech-enabled service in SaaS clothing, which that has got to be a assumption that everything under the sun is going to pitch themselves as SaaS, as generative AI, et cetera. And it's your job to get up in there and figure out, is that accurate? So the business model is like so much risk that it's insane. And then highly uncertain competitive environment. It's like, well, and I was thinking dude, remember when OpenAI released GPTs?
Yeah, every other custom chatbot business kind of went shut.
Poof. Can you imagine
Overnight,
being this is a chatbot thing that does this thing, and we just raised $4 million in venture, and we're going to go run at this. And it's like, all right, now Kale can make this chatbot on open.ai and he can do it in 2 hours. So that literally swallowed whole thousands of super ambitious, tons of momentum startups. And that is just a place that's not where micro SaaS firms exist very long. Like the thing that's beautiful in SaaS is you can move so fast and you can take markets, but there's the other side of that coin. You can wake up and realize somebody ate your lunch, breakfast, and dinner, and your house is gone. It's like, oh, that's not fun.
And then, if you do have the inkling that, okay, the industry is trending in a direction where someone could eat our lunch, and we're not too confident that we can scale the business to the point where it's sustainable as a passive income stream over a period of time, then you start to position yourself for a strategic sale to the person who is going to take your lunch. It's just about being smart with your exits.
Totally. Or just seeing the world move around, like the physics, right? Just appreciating the physics. Like if you're the most in touch with reality, you usually win. All right.
Pattern recognition, the physics and pattern recognition, baby.
Yes. Which I would argue is kind of the same thing, right? But it's just like the mechanics that are happening. And all the, some very interesting thought leaders have preached that, your ability to understand reality and remove your subjectivity, your cognitive biases, your groupthink, your, blah, blah, blah. Those people usually win because the tendency is that all that stuff is too overwhelming to clearly understand what's happening in the world around you, let alone predict what's going to happen next. So, all right. So the retention rates, it was so funny. It was 85%, which is sick. And it was like, okay.
But it's not SaaS.
And if you make that real, right, it's you have to replace your whole or replenish your entire customer base every 7 months. So not great. And if we think about the use cases, the potential use cases here, it's like, hey, I'm going to try an e-commerce thing. I need a logo, I need a website, and I need 30 social media posts. And then away they go. So it's a very consumption-based SaaS, which is what you see in business to consumer industries. So retention has got to be a function of like people that come in, they have a very defined need, right? It's not like an enduring pain point. It's not an enduring job to be done. They get in, they solve their need, and away they go. So then it's like, okay, how recurring are these revenues? Okay, and it's like now it's not really subscription based and it's not SaaS. And it's like, oh boy, you start to squirm in your chair. So anyway, I think we'll leave it at that. Quick wins and opportunities. Whoa, buddy. Yeah, so I mean, we spoke about this one. I mean, and you know what's funny? If you study the greats, you know what like Vista's playbook is, period?
What is it?
They come in, they do customer segmentation analysis. They figure out the 20% of the customers that are generating 80% of business impact, and they recalibrate the entire business to go hard as shit at that 20%.
And so they live by the Pareto principle.
They just power law to the bone, right? Pareto principle to the absolute bone. And they triple businesses like that.
Just like that. Wow.
Just like that. So this is the play that's available here where it's like, okay, we don't want to sell to consumers that just need some creative. We don't want to sell to businesses that aren't going to pay us the most. So it's probably a function of like, from an ideal customer profile perspective, it's like, let's look at our counts. Let's look at the onboarding lift and let's see the dynamics of their creative teams. So it's like, all right, it turns out our ideal customer has a chief creative or some creative person with no horsepower, no execution behind them. That's our best customer because they have enduring creative needs and they don't have the tooling or the personnel around them to get it done. Boom, you bolt on $2,000 a month and away you go.
It's almost like you want to say, hey, go after the large advertising studios with in-house creative teams or the design studios themselves where they spend way too much money employing hundreds of designers when they can break that team down to maybe about 5 to 10 people and just utilize our tools. Now that is a good business way.
And at the end of the day, it's just a labor arbitrage.
Yeah, that's it.
At the end of the day, it's like we're going to make your team faster so they can spread themselves and have more impact, or you can reduce your headcount and reduce your costs just to the bone. All right, we spoke about this, but verticalize the offering and then sequence ideal customer profiles. So instead of trying to sell everything or selling your thing to everyone, figure out that customer segment that is amazing. Recalibrate, reconfigure the assembly line, go hard, acquire as much market share as you can, and then move on to the next ICP. So you're just kind of sequencing and stacking ICPs to get to a place where you have a really interesting kind of share of the market. All right, and then lastly, and you had touched on this a little bit, but there's also partnership and integration plays, right? Because here, like the headline is, how do we improve retention? And one really good way to do that is go embed yourself in the tooling that is getting used on a daily basis by your target market. So it's like, hey, let's develop a Canva plugin, let's develop an Adobe plugin, let's develop a whatever. Cool. Now we can list our stuff in the Canva or the Adobe app marketplace. We get exposure to all their users. And we're super sticky because we're part of a tooling that they're never going to leave. So that's the other. And the buzzword for this is stickiness. So make the thing more sticky. And a good way to do that is to wedge it in between the stuff that is never going to go anywhere.
Exactly.
Market comps, and these are always weird to say out loud because there's so many numbers and it's confusing as hell. But all right, asking price, this firm wants 2.5 million. Comparables, and here the comp profile is ARR SaaS for Micro SaaS firms doing 700K to 900K. This firm wants 2.5 million. Comps want 4.6. We like that. That's a lot of thumbs up. On the revenue multiple, this firm wants 3.13x. The comp was 5.2x. Another 3 thumbs up. The profit margin, I thought the profit margin I guess this is where you scratch your head, right? It's like, how is a tech-enabled service creating a better profit margin than comparables that are all B2B SaaS? But it is. So they're doing 300K and comps are in the 262 range. So that gets 1 thumbs up. And then growth rate, they're throwing up 30. Comps are doing 57%. So that gets, that's almost half of kind of the comp growth rate. So that got 2 thumbs down, which you kind of just leave like, I'm just confused. I'm kind of confused around this whole thing.
I'm kind of just laughing at the whole thing because while we're grading it against a Micro SaaS B2B company, it's tech enabled. So it's almost like we want to discount any of the stats here just to, like we had 2.6 out of 4. It's probably going to be a 1.6 to 2 out of 4.
Yeah, because those revenues are not recurring. They're not high margin. So the 3X is like no shot, man. You'll get 1.5X. We all have tried to sell consulting firms before. It's like, I guess I'll pay you 1 times revenue. It's like, what does SDE or EBITDA look like? Like, that's a more interesting conversation. And all the IP is probably between the CEO's ears. I mean, we can talk about that for hours. But all right, concluding thoughts.
And I'm walking away from a tech-enabled consulting firm, and the margins are not great.
And more importantly, the quality of life is like, oh God, we got a bunch of business. Yay. Holy shit. We don't have enough people to do it. It's just like,
Client isn't happy with that one person. Got to find somebody else.
Yeah. And they just left a review, which is a representation of our entire firm. Not great.
Not great.
So concluding thoughts, graphic design is slapping. It is a massive category. It is exploding. And I guess with that comes the most well-funded, the most like the greatest concentration of intelligence right now in society is running at stuff that is going to change this category. Not our jam, not Micro SaaS's jam, period. Unit economics and business metrics. Oh boy. It's a tech-enabled service. We got to take all this stuff with a grain of salt. Our revenues, our cost scale with our revenues, our lifetime values are low margin. All things where you're like, oh God. And most of this is under the kind of this overarching assumption that everything is SaaS now and everything is generative AI. And people do that because they want the spanky, multiples and stuff. So don't be fooled.
Like a gold rush.
Or you're going to get absolutely hosed. I mean, if you pay a SaaS multiple for a tech-enabled services business, you just, shot yourself before the game started. So that's not great.
It's like the NFT gold rush. Do your due diligence.
Totally. And then the other thing is, the profit margin is solid. So is this a buy and hold? Let's, lever up, buy the deal. Paying our debt payments is going to eat a little bit of the margin, but we'll collect this net income and, happy days. And it's like, oh yeah, but let's say all your customers that you have right now are going to leave you in 7 months, and you're going to kind of naturally acquire some with the tooling, with the growth rate that's implied, but that's going to give you a 1 to 2 year shelf life to sit there and collect income and try to generate a return. And oh, by the way, you think you've got 2 years, maybe you have 3 months because OpenAI is about to create a banner thing and you're going to be out of business the next day.
Yep.
So,
or Adobe with their Creative Cloud is just going to allow design studios to just start doing everything in their full suite because they're almost there.
Or Microsoft, by the way, and they're trying to go super hard at productivity tooling right now. So all those things, it's like, yeah, we're a pass. And let's get back to origination and let's go find some deals. And we still got love for the game, though.
We still have love for the game. It wouldn't be the love for the game if we couldn't identify the good and the bad businesses to tell you, hey, here's what you should look for.
That's it. You got to kiss a lot of frogs. So we'll take this Kermit and set it back in the pond. Oh, all right, K. Lou. Deal teardown. That's a wrap, my guy. Go kick some ass today. Have some fun.
You too, my friend. And again, snazzy top next week. I might have to go jazz it up a bit.
I think you got to, man. We got to level up.
We got to level up now. Oh, as long as we don't get as far as tuxedos, we might be going too far.
Right. It's like we're going James Bond episode 30. Get ready for it.
Mission Impossible. Due diligence with Micro SaaS.
That's it, dude. That's it. All right, my friend. Go get him today. Cheers.
Cheers.